like what is the kind of like the status of bioengineering in terms of transforming the different ranges of industries that you talked about, right? So,
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think there's two aspects to that. One is to what degree do each of these industries use bioengineering at all? And then two is to what
mhm,
degree do they use it in an efficient way? And I think the former, actually,
mhm,
many of them are very mature in, right? Like I mentioned in pharma, there's a
okay,
huge number of modalities that I would call bioengineered.
yeah,
In crops, it's not like we're the first
yeah,
people to think about how to make better crops. I think people like Bayer have been thinking about that for a very long time. And I think for a long time, we've been thinking about things like genetically modified organisms. I would consider those to be
mhm,
bioengineered systems for how we go about
sure,
improving crop
yes,
production. I think at the same time, a lot of how companies have approached this has largely been internal facing R&D organizations that largely focus on the one problem that is most important to them and solve that problem by engineering a particular system. And then when they've solved that problem, most likely dismantling the tools they built to engineer that particular system and moving on with it. A great example happens in therapeutics. You see this all the time where people have built a platform to design therapeutics, and then ultimately they take their molecule into clinical development, and all of the company's money goes into clinical development because that costs a ton of money, makes sense.
mhm,
And so this is not actually a critique of the industry, it's sort of a reflection of the reality of the industry, which is that people tend to make bespoke tools and then carry them forward and not necessarily have reusable systems in the way we think about an engineering discipline, about building reusable systems that you can apply from one domain to the other. And I think that's really how we think about the opportunity in bioengineering is if we can really make this an engineering discipline, we should be able to have
mhm,
technology stacks that you can copy from one domain to another, from one pharma company to another, and ideally outside of one vertical to another, where, next generation sequencing is next generation sequencing. We should be able to use that for all sorts of different application areas.